Hey everyone, it's Josh here from the Call to Defend podcast, back with another episode, and today we're going to be talking about why we do apologetics. It's been a little bit. You've been hearing some of Caleb's rants, and as you know, we've been now doing a little bit more of a live stream situation, and he'll be moving his rants over to Thursdays, except for this coming Thursday. I think I'll be in charge of Tuesdays and Thursdays live stream. Please be praying for Caleb as he recovers. He recently, my goodness, had surgery done, and he's recovering right now. He's in a great deal of pain, but good spirits. We just ask you to please lift him up in prayer, and that he would heal soon and be able to go back to life normal soon, not just because it makes my life easier, but I know that he loves being with his daughter. He loves getting to engage with people, and there's a lot of things that you can't do when you're, recovering. So let's just pray that he recovers, but this will also be a time to glorify the Lord in his recovery. Anyways, so the question today, why do we do apologetics? And I'm actually going to be sort of addressing this question, but then also I'm actually going to tell you guys a little bit of a story of how we got to begin Call to Defend. I know we're still a small ministry, but it's still a good place to be, and we love doing what we do. So apologetics, I've had some people get into, maybe not debates with me, but in conversation where they see apologetics as it's a tool to make Christians know more about Christianity, but that's it. It is just something to kind of help Christians feel smarter. And, that might be like underplaying the description a little bit of the other side. But even then, I still think no matter if it's fully explained or left in the little bits, it still does not begin with understanding the proper context of which apologetics originally comes from. As you have probably heard before, our verse for this ministry is 1 Peter 3:15, which talks about how we should always be ready to give an apologia, a defense, a reason for the faith that we have, for the hope that we believe in, and that we are to do this with gentleness and respect, that we are to carry ourselves in love as we share the truth with other people. So apologetics is a tool to be used for evangelism, because you are not sharing this information just to elevate the Christian mind. This is in the context of those who are not believers and explaining them the hope that you have in Christianity. Explain to them the questions they may have about Christianity. It is a tool that can be used for evangelism. And as Paul talks about in his letters to the Corinthians, it can be used, not this exact word, but he talks about how there are false ideas, and that he and those who are with him were capturing these ideas and tearing them down because they were stumbling blocks or they were barriers in people's ways of coming to know the truth of the gospel. And so that is one reason why we do apologetics, is that it is a tool to help us be able to explain our faith, to explain what reason that we have, but then also to be a tool to help tear down ideas and barriers that might be blocking someone off from seeing the truth. Now, there are times where we don't want to use apologetics because it is the wrong tool to use, and that's when we need to address the heart. Ultimately, we're going to get to the heart eventually, but the question is the idea or the argument the thing is upholding the heart and then we can take it down, or is it the heart that is holding up these ideas? And what I mean by that is, Frank Turek asks a great question. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? You could tell the difference when someone says yes or no. If it's yes, then they still have to turn their heart over to Christ, but there are some barriers of which we can work through to help them come to see the truth. And if they say no, then no matter what we say to them, they're still going to reject Christ regardless. And so we have to be able to test and see where this tool is going to be used to aid someone, whether it be them directly or someone else indirectly, or it is the wrong tool to pull out. Wrong one to bring out. You wouldn't bring a hammer to put a screwdriver in. And in this case, sometimes apologetics is the hammer, and you need it for the time when you need to use the nails. And use a screwdriver when you need to deal with the screws. So this actually became something that I thought about a lot because of the reason Call to Defend got started. So Call to Defend began because in one of my classes, I had a professor make some really ridiculous statements, looking back. Statements that were talking about the Bible and Christianity that were things that I knew were wrong. I didn't know how to prove it. And it wasn't that I went seeking to then prove him wrong or to prove myself right. Like I wasn't going at it with an eisegesis. But I know that I've heard that the things he said, I've heard it from the text, that it is contradictory. But I didn't know how to explain it. And it got me questioning, what else do I not really know about my faith, about Christianity in general, about the world around me? How much of my life, of my faith, am I basing off of the things I hear from other people and not from the things I'm actually going out and learning? And so I began to study my Bible more seriously. I began to study apologetics the next year. And I began to study more theology. And I went back to more apologetics. And then I got into more Hebrew and Greek stuff and ancient cultures. And all of it, let me make this clear. Apologetics is not just like the things that, I love Frank Turk, but it's not just the things that he presents, like the arguments for science, the arguments for history, the arguments for textual criticism, and all these things. But it is also knowing the text, and so you can be able to give reasons for why the text says what it says. Or you can understand it more deeply and understand the story of the gospel more deeply, the things that you long for, the things that you hope for as a Christian. And so that's the short version, but really it was that this teacher said this thing. He was saying something to the effect that homosexuality is not condemned in the New Testament. Well, I knew that was wrong, and so I went to find out where that was. I thought I heard that it was, and I went to try to find the passage, and I looked into the Greek and asked them for my friends who I knew more than I did, and got into these conversations. After that point in time, I then started reading my Bible even more because I kind of got really sucked into my Bible. And then I started reading a whole lot, and I started studying and joining different Bible studies. Shortly after that, I then became a leader of a Bible study at my school, and my buddy and I, Josiah, who's you've heard from this podcast before, he came with me, and we led this Bible study together, which then got me to start learning a little bit of the Greek and Hebrew. Now, what's funny is that I am right now really into Old Testament Hebrew stuff. Back then, I had no desire to have any association with that. I did not want to work with Hebrew. I did not want to work so much with the Old Testament. I wanted to work with the New Testament because that is the thing that people had a lot of questions about, was the New Testament. And I felt like it had more application in the New Testament and not so much in the Old Testament. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, oh boy, was I completely wrong on that. And I was very much humbled very quickly when I started really studying the Old Testament, especially in light of Hebrew and ancient cultures. So we then go through that, and then I started to do a little book reading with my girlfriend and one of my best friends at the time. And we were reading this book that was the first book we ever promoted on our channel. And then we started reading that, and I decided, you know what? I would really like to start to engage in a ministry, but I know I'm going to be leaving my school soon. So I want to do something that I can actually continue no matter where I am at. And that's when I had the idea for Call to Defend. Actually, it began even before then, was with the LED podcast. Now, that is a slightly different story how that one started, but I remember looking back on the LED podcast, thinking how much it sucked, and realizing that is something I think I could still do if I had a better idea of how I wanted to do it, and have a better system in place, a better structure, a more of a focus and a goal. And then I started getting into that because apologetics really helped me begin to understand my faith better. And then I had a lot of people coming in and asking me. And then so we got to go out and help them understand the faith more. And those who weren't Christians, because they had questions. And they're like, well, doesn't the Bible say this, and this science thing over here says this? And we're like, no, that's actually not what it says. And we can explain those things. Or I don't understand the gospel. God had to appease God. And it's like that. And we had to walk through the gospel because I was able to explain it better. Again, apologetics is not just like, do you know philosophy, science, and history? It's, do you know your text? Do you know your faith? Apologetics is just giving a reason, giving a defense, an explanation of your faith. And apologetics is a tool that can be used for evangelism. And so what became a goal for us at Call to Defend was, we know that going online, it is a public circle, right? The internet, like, everyone can see it. Muslims, Christians, atheists, everyone. And so we wanted to really provide a service where we could help Christians grow in their understanding of the text and of the world around them, so they can have discussions with people where they're at. But then also for those who are maybe not Christian and they come across this and they hear some of these things, they then can engage in this, and perhaps it'll place rocks in their shoes for the furthering of the gospel. Call to Defend has always been had a focus of really reaching as many people in a variety of ways as possible, providing ways to reach those who are not Christians and providing ways to reach those who are Christians. In fact, sometimes we did response videos, and we still do, as a way to help us engage with those who are maybe of other faiths or other worldviews, and they can see how perhaps some of the people that they're listening to are making arguments that don't hold up. Now, have we always handled those with the most respectful way? No, and that's something we have to admit. That's something I have to admit, that I have not always carried myself in the best posture. And so what we have to understand is that apologetics is just not this thing that's meant to make Christians feel smarter. It's a tool. It's a device that we use when we are engaged in conversation. And we all have to use it at some point where someone will ask us. And here's the thing, you don't need to be a world-class theologian. But we do provide this service to help those begin to understand more of what it is that they believe. And here's the really cool thing about this. Caleb and I do have academic background for this, and we are looking to get more me specifically. But when this all began, we didn't really have our paper all figured out and done. We didn't have our paperwork, our degrees quite yet when Call to Defend began. And so really when this began, it was a layman, which I would still argue I'm very much a layman in comparison to scholars, but a layman who is learning to research to help other laymen come to know the truth of the gospel, to come to know the further understanding of the gospel and ways to defend Christianity, ways to explain the different questions skeptics may have, or help them to see why maybe their worldview or their objections don't hold up. And that can place a rock in their shoe, which will then cause them to think. Because here's the thing, not everyone is meant to be a reaper. Meaning, when we look at what Jesus talks about, there are those who sow and those who are reaping. The sowers are those who are going to be planting the seeds, planting rocks in people's shoes. And the reapers are the ones who are cultivating that which has been grown. And sometimes you do both. Sometimes both happen in one conversation, but they don't always happen immediately. In fact, you might be one who is often planting a lot of seeds, or maybe one who's often reaping them. We should always be ready for the fact that the Holy Spirit may use us to plant rocks or seeds, whatever analogy you want to use, or to be the cultivator of those things, the one that he works through to bring it home. And so apologetics is one of those tools. It could be used to plant seeds. It could even be used to cultivate. I had a conversation where a person had questions about Christianity. It's a beautiful story. In fact, I think Caleb and I talked about one of our live streams. And it was in that conversation where I engaged in some apologetics, and it was one of the tools that was used to help him see the truth of Christianity, of which he became a Christian. And it was a beautiful, exciting moment. And we got to tend to the things of the mind and the things of the heart. Apologetics may not necessarily be a thing that tends the heart a lot, but it can affect the mind and the heart often are linked together and working together in this relationship of understanding the world around you. Now, maybe one is in the lead more than the other, but it doesn't mean that they are completely separate of each other. In fact, that's why the Old Testament often kind of refers to them as the same thing, talking about the heart as if it is the mind. And that is something that we need to understand and be aware of. So Call to Defend began with a need for me. And then I wanted to help others who might have the same need, because I understood that apologetics can be used to help Christians grow, but also it can be a tool to help non-believers grow. And that's honestly why Caleb and I might go back and redo some of our old videos, because some of them were more focused on things that skeptics may wonder. We've done a lot of videos lately for those who are currently Christians. I mean, we've done our polemics, and we've had a lot of Muslim responses to it, which has been awesome, really cool to engage in those conversations. Some of them didn't go so great, and some of them did. But we also had some videos that were more for, yes, Christians could use these understandings, but also for those who were skeptics or maybe use some of these arguments, and then they could see why the argument doesn't really hold up. Like the whole idea that every religion is basically the same thing. They're not. They don't teach the same thing at all, actually. When you get to what each religion really is, there's a lot of contradictions, and only one of them can be true. And so that was something that we did a while ago and may bring back. So apologetics, again, I'm going to say this over and over again, but this will be the last time, is a tool for evangelism. Is a tool to help those come to know the truth come to understand the truth. In fact, that is how one of the reasons that Lieb Strobel became a Christian was because he went to seek the truth. He went seeking and doing this whole research and his whole goal was to disprove Christianity, to disprove the resurrection. And then the evidence compiled up and he realized, I can't disprove it. Now what? In fact, I think one of the things he said was, okay, God, now what? You win. And then time goes by and his heart is also being worked on as his mind is coming to understand these things. And he became one of the biggest authors of our time, talking about Christianity with his book, Case for Christ, and a variety of other things. So I hope this podcast was interesting and helpful. I mean, it gives you a little bit of idea where we began. It also tells you why we want to do apologetics and the importance it has. And so I hope it encourages you in your walk with the Lord and your desire to study more of the text, understand that the mind and the heart go together and they help each other, and that this can be something that you can use in conversations, but let the Spirit guide you in discernment for what tool to use. It may be apologetics, it may not be apologetics, but be aware and let the Spirit guide you through discernment. Thank you, guys.